As we speak right now, this week, we are expected to start to get those straw polls to potentially select the next Secretary General of the United Nations. Do we have any sense about the 6 candidates and what you, as president, would like to see in terms of what their priorities should be over the next 5 years?
The next Secretary General will not only be the face of this unique multilateral institution, but it will also decide on whether the UN will play a relevant role on peace and security, but also on embracing the chances we have in an interconnected world about global governance structure, on AI, for example, on lifting millions out of poverty. And as you said, currently there are 6 candidates, 4 women, 2 men. So far, there has never been a female Secretary General in 80-year history of the United Nations. So it's really a decisive moment and an important decision also by member states to decide which person represents 8 billion people best in these challenging global times.
Well, let's talk about those 8 billion people. Prior to the 2015-2016 campaign, this was a relatively opaque process, the selection process. That opened up a little bit about 10 years ago. And under your leadership as president of the 80th Assembly, you have tried to make things a bit more transparent, having the candidates come out and give these interviews well in advance of the actual selection process. Are those people, the 8 billion people out there, do they actually have a say in this to some degree or another?
They are represented by their member states, by their government, by the ambassadors here in New York. However, we also know that in the modern times, power lies also in communication around the world. So if there's now the saying out there, for example, that 2 years ago, member states agreed by consensus that it should be this time really female candidates, because otherwise, those 8 billion people, or at least 4 billion, half of women and girls, would question if an institution built on human rights, on equality, was not capable of finding a woman again. This will have a total different debate than it had 10 years ago, when we didn't really have the power of social media. So now, as we're having this town hall meeting on Thursday coming up, live streamed by Bloomberg, we will have the chance also that people hear about what's going on, because frankly speaking, most of the people probably don't know that the Secretary General process is ongoing. But this will be also a power game, frankly speaking, between the Security Council, upon which recommendation a person will be nominated. But in the end, it is the 193 member states in the General Assembly representing 8 billion who take the final decision.
But those 5 permanent members of the Security Council, which includes the U.S., obviously, as well as Russia, China, France, and the U.K., they do have an inordinate amount of power to be able to say, this is the person that we want. If they put someone on your desk who maybe you do not think is appropriate, what options would you have to push back on that?
In these challenging times, in my personal view, it's always how you define power. Obviously, being a member of the Security Council, a P5 member, you would say, well, it's up on us to recommend somebody. Yet, if you define power, that in the end, the General Assembly has to agree, and if the General Assembly, so the member states, make very clear, it is hard for us, for example, to vote on a person who is denying climate change. If we just had a couple of weeks ago a joint resolution in the General Assembly about the member states' responsibility of fighting climate crisis, because it's one of the key drivers for more conflicts and crises around the world, so it's a peace and security issue, then power shifts. Because if there would be a proposal, for example, where a person would face a situation that he or she is not sure whether she will make the majority in the General Assembly, then obviously everything changes. And this is unique about this process, because as you mentioned, before it was behind closed doors, there was no television reporting about it, there was no social media asking questions, so where does that person stand on peace and security or women's rights, for example. But we have had also in the history a situation that, for example, when Kofi Annan was finally elected, the African states made very clear, because it was their turn, if this is not an African person being proposed, we don't even take a vote on back then it was him.
Yes.
Yeah. So this time it could be also very clear that member states are saying, we agreed 2 years ago that we should nominate women. How would we explain back to our constituency afterwards we could not find a woman? You cannot say, well, there was no competent woman out there in the world if you have 4 billion candidates. Right. So this is also a question about the credibility of the General Assembly. So also a signal to the Security Council, right, if they could propose only a man, or if they would decide then, okay, we propose a man and a woman, which never happened before, that there were 2 persons.
I am curious, though. I mean, some of the members of the Permanent Security Council are also some of the biggest ones that are in arrears to the United Nations. You've had to cut the budget. You've had to adjust. The United States is at least several billion behind. China, last time I checked, had not made its payments for the year. Is there a sense here that this is a permanent cycle where we are going to see nations either not pay what they are obligated to or to delay those payments?
We are in a very critical moment, and this is why the current Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, has rang the alarm bell that we will face a liquidity crisis. Again, my philosophy is in every crisis is a chance. Because when we faced this situation that we could not pay for peacekeeping at all anymore, beginning of July, member states came together. I invited all of them and said, we have to change our financial rules. For example, we had this very frankly speaking, ridiculous rule that you have to pay back money which was never collected in the first place if you did not spend it. So if the US didn't pay, obviously the UN could not spend it, and we changed this rule. So we see at the moment that under pressure, the vast majority of member states understands that the UN is the life insurance for most of the countries in the world, and under pressure we can reform. But this will be the key new task for the next Secretary General, to drive forward this reform, but also make clear to member states, especially the big P5, if you do not pay, you could even lose your voting right in the General Assembly.
But some of the reform measures that have been in place right now have, I don't know, either intentionally or unintentionally been conflated with austerity.
Yes.
Is this an austerity move by your part and the parts of the other leaders, or is this sort of a temporary pullback, adjusting the finances until you get the other countries to pay up and pay on time?
Neither. This is about leadership and taking up the responsibility by those who believe that we need the United Nations. And I always say, no single day would the world be better off without this United Nations, besides all the shortcomings. Because we just spoke, you came here by plane. You would not enter a plane if there would not be the UN, because it's also responsible for safety and aviation. We would not be possible to fly around the world if it would not be the World Health Organization having fought with member states on fighting COVID together. So at a moment where, as you said, there are certain actors who would really like to destroy this organization. It's a self-interest that we reform it, because it was built 80 years ago, and some of the mechanisms obviously do not work like 1947. So we have to change this. For example, the issue, how many resolutions do we have? We have more than 40,000 mandates yearly in the UN. We have 27,000 meetings. So this part of the reform, which I'm driving forward together with the Secretary General, this is what we need to protect the United Nations. On the other hand, we should not allow cynics to weaponize this unique reform which we need to destroy the house from inside out. And this is why, for me, in the reform, it's so important to make clear that the UN was founded always on 3 pillars: peace and security, sustainable development, and human rights. And to those who argue now we should do less on sustainable development because this would be saving money, I would always say, well, this is not the foundation of the United Nations, because the founders knew after the Second World War, without sustainable development, you will just enter the next war and crisis.